We are not banning hemp. We are banning high.
Tension on the House floor over a bill to ban THC products in Texas.
They don't want to return to prohibition. They don't want a nanny state.
As lawmakers crack down on products people buy to get high, we examine the new push to expand access to medical cannabis in Texas. A major deal at the state capitol to dramatically change and boost funding for Texas schools.
This is not just a funding bill. It's a long-term commitment to the future of public education.
Billions of new dollars designated for public schools, the plan's earning bipartisan praise but also raising questions. Texas now has a new law aimed to make sure people who work in schools are not a threat to children.
We're trying to stamp all this out because we want kids to go to school in a safe environment.
We look at efforts this session to close loopholes in the state's do not hire registries.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Texas lawmakers are ready to ban products that people can buy to get high. The Texas House officially passed a bill to ban all consumable products with hemp-derived THC. That's the element in the plant that gives users a high feeling. Right now, you can buy consumable hemp products that contain THC. Shops and convenience stores all over the state sell things like Delta 8 vapes, as well as lotions, oils, or drinks. Supporters of the ban say the THC products can be harmful.
They are psychosis-inducing, overdose-prone chemicals masquerading as relief. These products being sold are not tested, not dosed consistently, and not supervised by a medical professional.
Opponents of the bill pushed for better regulations rather than a ban. Before the vote, they warned about the potential economic harm of the legislation.
Texas businesses do not want a ban on THC. This is a ban on 50,000 jobs held by working families across the state. It's a ban on $8 billion in annual tax revenue.
Another concern raised by several lawmakers focused on veterans and other people who use over-the-counter THC products to treat medical conditions. Supporters of the bill say those needs should be handled by prescriptions through the Texas Compassionate Use Program, or TCUP. The program provides low THC products to someone with a prescription, and as Dylan McKim shows us, lawmakers are now pushing to expand that program.
But if it gets you high, it is not legal anymore.
As Texas lawmakers ban intoxicating hemp, some argue the state is removing an option for people with chronic pain, like veterans.
We're taking away potentially their freedom to choose this product that has, in their own words, saved their lives.
But as the state closes one door, there is a push to expand the state's medicinal marijuana program.
I don't ever want somebody to be denied access to a medication that may be of benefit.
It's called the Texas Compassionate Use Program, or TCUP. Right now, it's facing accessibility challenges. Operators will drive product to drop-off locations for patients, but if the patient misses the pickup, that product cannot stay there overnight. It has to be driven back, sometimes hundreds of miles away.
You're duplicating your logistics cost at every single transaction, pretty much.
Nico Richardson is the CEO of Texas Original, one of the 3 dispensing organizations allowed to cultivate and deliver the state's medicinal marijuana. A bill that already passed the House would increase the number of organizations to 15 and allow for satellite storage facilities.
Dramatically lower the cost for the operators, which will flow through immediately to the cost of the medicine for patients.
It would also expand who is eligible under the program, allowing for people with chronic pain.
These are the medicines that I had to take. It's killing me.
Like LaTanya Whittington, who is prescribed opiates.
My debilitating and chronic pain should be designated for a physician to prescribe me cannabis.
But a question on everyone's mind:
is it guaranteed that the teacup is going to pass the Senate?
As that question was asked Wednesday night, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick took to social media to say he supports expanding teacup. Dylan McKim, State of Texas.
Here's a look at what the Lieutenant Governor posted on social media about the Compassionate Use Program. He vowed to, quote, expand licenses and have satellite locations for the first time for prescribed products from doctors for our veterans, and those in need. Shortly before debate started on the bill to ban THC, we learned about a deal between the House and Senate to increase public school funding. The legislation had been stalled in the Senate for nearly a month. Now lawmakers are ready to send billions of new dollars to public schools. State Capitol reporter Adam Schwager breaks down the details.
The Texas Senate advanced a bill to invest $8.5 billion into the Texas public school system.
Incredible, long-standing impact that will ultimately result in student outcomes to help Texas lead in education for the nation.
The bill is the result of a compromise between the House and the Senate, with Speaker of the House Dustin Burrows saying there's $1.3 billion being invested in brand new allotment for basic costs, $850 million invested in special education, and $430 million for school safety. And nearly half of this new money, $4.2 billion, is dedicated to teacher and staff pay raises. A permanent pay raise would come to teachers after their third year of teaching and after their fifth year, as the Senate pointed out in committee that veteran teachers make less compared to their counterparts in other states.
House Bill 2 delivers what Texas students and educators truly need and have been asking for. This is not just a funding bill. It's a long-term commitment to the future of public education.
While negotiators on both sides of the aisle have celebrated this compromise, some are not so enthused, like Austin Rep. James Tallarico. Tallarico doesn't feel the bill invests enough money and is concerned about the lack of new funding in the flexible basic allotment.
They're trying to micromanage our local school communities across the state, and that's not going to work. The only way that we can keep schools open and that we can increase student performance is if we allow local communities to do the job that we're asking them to do without the state looking over their shoulders and micromanaging everything they do.
The amended bill now heads to the Texas House. If the House agrees to the Senate's changes, it'll go to the governor's desk to sign. Adam Schwager, State of Texas.
Just before the vote on the school finance plan, senators approved a bill to improve school discipline policies. The legislation comes as teachers report a rise in disruptions affecting the ability of students to learn.
Violent and threatening students are regularly placing public schools at a risk of harm. Additionally, the current process for discipline are often insufficient to address the dangerous student behaviors they face today.
Senators made several changes to House Bill 6 to give schools more flexibility to address student discipline. That includes making it easier for schools to use out-of-school suspensions for students who repeatedly threaten the safety of other children. The bill clarifies rules for in-school suspensions. It also sets requirements for how to document disruptive behavior before suspending students in kindergarten through third grade. Texas now has a new law aimed at rooting out bad actors from schools and other places where children learn.
We're trying to stamp all this out because we want kids to go to school in a safe environment.
We look at efforts this session to close every loophole in the state's do not hire registries. After an explosive committee hearing led to an investigation into a state Medicaid contractor, the case is now closed. What the Texas Attorney General is saying about the findings. Just 3 months after announcing an investigation into a state Medicaid contractor, the Texas Attorney General closed the case and cleared Superior Health Plan of allegations it spied on Texans. During an explosive hearing at the Texas Capitol in March, lawmakers accused the company of hiring a private investigator to dig up information on their colleagues and even on families the company insures. However, this week, the Office of Attorney General released a statement saying Superior's activities involving researching and consolidating publicly available documents into internal reports, which does not violate Texas law. The statement added there was no evidence of any surveillance or violation of privacy discovered or indicated within the investigation, nor was any privately held or confidential information such as protected health information included in the reports. Avery Travis has been following this story and is joining us now for some context. Thanks for being with us.
Of course. Thanks, Josh.
So for everyone who hasn't been following this, or to catch up, what's been the reaction this week to the Attorney General's findings?
You know, there really hasn't been much since that happened earlier this week, which is maybe a bit surprising because at the time, lawmakers were openly frustrated. That we heard a lot from them about how they were disappointed, even at times in that hearing that you mentioned, angry, admonishing the former CEO of the company and speculating about whether taxpayer dollars had been used for some of this research. Lawmakers really wanted to know how far this went. But this week, we have heard from Superior. It released a statement saying it was, quote, pleased the numerous false accusations resulting from the March 26 DOJ committee hearing have been rebutted by the Attorney General's review. The statement went on to say Superior remains committed to transparency and accountability. They said we will continue to ensure that all partners and practices reflect the integrity we expect of ourselves. Now, in that hearing we mentioned, they did admit to hiring a firm for background research. They repeatedly insisted it was only ever looking for publicly available information for what they called the normal course of business. They gave a few examples. They said preparing for meetings, identifying conflicts of interest, or even identifying fraud, waste, and abuse in their insurance work. However, they did note that the research in question included irrelevant and unnecessary personal information. In a statement right after that hearing, they apologized and they said, quote, that was inappropriate and never should have happened. They went on to say this occurred prior to 2019 and does not reflect the values and standards of our current leadership. They also fired the CEO, who was included in some of those email exchanges with that firm.
And you've seen some of these emails in question, right?
That's right. We confirmed they're the same emails that some of the lawmakers were referencing in that DOJ committee hearing and that they had reviewed. They appeared to show that CEO asking for in-depth reports on people. In fact, we reported one email referenced a lawmaker's divorce records. Another mentioned an adoptive mother's social security number and some other information, including photos of her home and her address. But as the Attorney General said, they do believe all of that was obtained through publicly available sources. They say that their investigation, which was expedited, but it showed that they did not break any of Texas privacy laws.
So lawmakers and advocates noted their biggest concern was whether Texans who receive health care from this contractor are receiving the best care. The investigation did not go into those issues, but there has been, has there actually been any progress when it comes to addressing those concerns?
It's a good question, Josh, and it's something I know you all have talked about on this show. What might get lost in this conversation is that Superior is one of just several insurance companies who provide health care through several different programs to really the most vulnerable Texans, the most in need, disabled children. Some programs serve foster children. And so advocates and families and even lawmakers in that DOJ committee hearing in March really hammered home the point that the reason they were so focused on what this background research was is they want to make sure these companies are providing the best health care for families and children. And so we heard a lot of really emotional testimony during that hearing from lawmakers saying that's the charge we have tasked not just Superior Health Plan, but all of these companies with as state contractors, and they want the focus to be on that. We do want to note a law was filed this session, or excuse me, a bill was filed this session, and it has now been sent to the governor to be considered to become law just this week. The bill was authored by Jeff Leach, and what it would do is it would make really illegal surveillance by state contractors. They say they want to make sure that private information does not come up in the course of the work of state contractors. And so it's yet to be seen what that law will really do, but we will note that that lawmaker, Jeff Leach, mentioned this issue with Superior Health Plan in the conversations surrounding that bill that's now been sent to the governor. So something for us to watch.
All right, Avery, thank you for all the insight. A new Texas law aims to make sure the people who work in schools are not a threat to children. We look at how efforts to close loopholes in the state's do not hire registries are advancing this session. A bill aimed at improving law enforcement's response to mass shootings is closer to becoming law. We look at the new rules that could save lives. Plus, the push to cut your property taxes, what lawmakers are doing now and why your input could change the size of your tax bill.
We're trying to stamp all this out because we want kids to go to school in a safe environment.
Texas now has a new law aimed at rooting out bad actors from schools and other places where children learn. And another bill is inching closer to the governor's desk. Investigator Kelly Wiley updates us on the legislation sparked by our reporting. Lawmakers say it attempts to close every loophole in the state's do not hire registries.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed Senate Bill 1437 this week. It'll become law September 1st, allowing the Texas Juvenile Justice Department to designate former employees or volunteers permanently ineligible for certification if they engage in conduct that threatens juvenile safety. Last year, KXAN found records showing that TJJD allowed a former corrections officer, Isaiah Smith, who the agency was investigating for alleged sexual misconduct, to resign and remain eligible for hire weeks after firing him. Records show TJJD's board eventually voted to make Smith ineligible for rehire, but it was more than a year after the settlement and after Smith was arrested and charged for a separate allegation of indecency with a minor. The board's vote also came months after the agency determined he had an inappropriate relationship with a minor at one of its facilities. The agency told us the decision to make him ineligible was not because of his arrest, but because the process to do so was already underway. Our investigation also revealed how Smith was able to get a tutoring job at a public school, all while being investigated by a state agency. It sparked Senator Paul Betancourt to file Senate Bill 571, a sweeping 72-page bill that he says is an attempt to close every loophole a potential predator might use to gain access to minors in Texas's schools. That bill is set to go to the House floor for a vote next.
Now we're trying to close every loophole we can think of because we simply don't want the trash to be passed from one school to the next, from the public schools to the private schools, and have these sexual predators out here somehow getting access to students.
Senate Bill 571 would authorize TEA to investigate volunteers and third-party service providers like tutors who are accused of certain misconduct. It also reduces the time a superintendent would have to report certain misconduct to the state and increases the penalties for school leaders who don't report suspected misconduct by the required date. The bill, for the most part, has received bipartisan support. More recently, a confidentiality provision was added, and it requires that some records tied to these investigations be held confidential. It has drawn criticism, though, from some folks who say it effectively hides misconduct records from the public. Kelly Wiley, State of Texas.
A bill aimed at improving law enforcement's response to mass shootings is closer to becoming law. Senators passed House Bill 33, also known as the Uvalde Strong Act. It aims to confront response failures during the Robb Elementary School tragedy when a gunman shot and killed 19 children and 2 educators. Students were trapped in their classroom for more than an hour while nearly 400 law enforcement officers waited to confront the shooter. The legislation has several requirements aimed at improving the response to a mass shooting. It requires city, county, and campus police adopt standardized active shooter response policies. School districts and law enforcement would be required to meet annually to plan their active shooter response. The bill also requires officers to complete a training program on how to respond to a school shooting. It's the first bill for Representative Don McLaughlin. He was the mayor of Uvalde at the time of the Robb Elementary shooting. Texas could see an extensive study of its mental health facilities following Senate approval of a measure filed after our investigation. Senator Sarah Eckhart authored Senate Bill 719, saying state hospitals are already overstrained and overcapacity, among other services. These sites treat patients charged with crimes and found incompetent to stand trial. Due to limited space, they are waiting months, even years in some cases, before getting a state hospital bed. Eckhart says there is no official state estimate of future bed needs. The bill now goes to the House in the final days of the session. We've reported extensively on the impact of the wait list, including people dying before reaching trial and families left waiting for justice. Catch up on our coverage by clicking on the mental competency link in this week's State of Texas story on our website. Legislation known as the Botox Party Bill is headed to the governor's desk.
There being 107 ayes, 39 nays, Senate Bill 378 is finally passed.
The Texas House approved the bill to tighten state law over who can administer Botox injections and similar treatments. The push for patient safety comes after our backroom Botox investigation highlighted medical concerns associated with Botox injections. The bill would prevent barbers, cosmetologists, and estheticians from administering Botox and other injectables unless they are licensed or authorized to give the shots. The legislation would also give the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation more disciplinary authority over those professionals.
SB 378 just makes certain that your post-session Botox is done so in a safe manner by a licensed individual.
Georgetown Senator Charles Schwager authored the bill. He told us he pushed for the measure after hearing about parties taking place where unauthorized injections are administered to friends and family. If signed by the governor, the new law would go into effect on September 1st. A tax cut could be on the way for Texas homeowners, but there's one hurdle left to clear: why a vote in November will have an effect on your property taxes. Texas homeowners are closer to getting a tax cut after a pair of bills passed the Texas House. Both bills call for raising the homestead exemption. That's the amount of a home's value that is not subject to property taxes. Currently, the exemption for homeowners is $100,000. The House passed Senate Bill 4, which would raise it to $140,000. The House also passed Senate Bill 23, which provides an additional boost for elderly and disabled Texans. If both bills become law, homeowners who are over 65 or disabled would get a homestead exemption of $200,000. Both SB 4 and SB 23 require amendments to the Texas Constitution to take effect. The House also passed resolutions to put the issues before Texas voters on the November ballot. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.